Okay, I think we'll get going. So I'm new to using Zoom here for these trainings, so I'm going to do my best here. If you want to make comments, I believe you all are able to do so just by unmuting. Otherwise, the chat I'll have open and we'll keep an eye on that. How's everybody doing today? It's like everybody's in Wisconsin. Can everybody hear me? Okay. If you can't hear me, let me know. Is everybody in Wisconsin, or do you have some people from outside of Wisconsin? Okay. Hot here today. Assume it's hot throughout the state. Okay, so today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. Love it. Yeah. Summer. I know this concept has been around for a bit. It's been kind of a buzzword for a while. You don't hear it as much anymore. Just so I have a kind of an idea, how many have either or participated or sat in on some sort of workshop on emotional intelligence? You can just type into the chat. Okay. So for those of you that have, some of this might be a little bit redundant. There may be some information that you hadn't heard because we did add in some stuff that you might not see in a standard emotional intelligence workshop. For those of you that haven't, hopefully you can take something from this and apply it, be at work or, well, work and or personal life. I think it can come in handy. So the idea of emotional intelligence is that it's not the same as intelligence or IQ, and that it's actually been found that having higher level of emotional intelligence allows people to have better relationships and even be better at work than just having a high IQ. So it's another area of intelligence that's important to be mindful of, pay attention to, and improve in areas. And everybody can always improve in certain areas of emotional intelligence. So what we'll be going through today is we'll be talking about why emotional intelligence is important, define the components of emotional intelligence, and then discuss ways to be more emotionally intelligent. So to start off, we're going to talk about why it matters. And some of you might, as we're going through this information, I'm sure each of you will be kind of envisioning where this may apply in your life, and automatically you might go to work. And I do think it's very important to be mindful of this at work. So if that's your frame of reference, that's totally fine. And you can also maybe think a little bit about too how this might apply at home or in interpersonal relationships outside of work. So, and you can make comments about this, but just some examples here. Do we know someone or people who are extremely intelligent but have no people skills? Meaning maybe they're a little bit standoffish, or their body language or how they communicate is maybe misinterpreted a lot. Do we know people who frequently make a big deal out of little problems? Do we know just awkward sometimes? Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, some people just maybe not quite as skilled socially or not aware of how they're interpreted. And all of us have blind spots. So it's important to become aware of those and understanding how we are interpreted, because it's not always accurate how we think we are interpreted. And that's one of the central components to this is, how do we view ourselves, and does that match up with how other people view us? So then we all know people that might react or overreact to problems that may not matter in a week or a day. They just kind of have an anxious response to stressors. Do we know people who just can't seem to have a reasonable conversation because they get defensive, rude, and sometimes aggressive? Do we know people that have a lot of potential but lack motivation and initiative? And so we can all think about people we know, whether it be in the workforce or in our personal lives, that do this from time to time, or it's common for them to do. It's also important to recognize, like, do you yourself engage in these behaviors at times? So we really, with this presentation, we really want you to think more so of yourself and how you come across and how you think you come across. All right, so here's just a list of traits between a high level of emotional intelligence and a low level of emotional intelligence. So people that are high in the emotional intelligence scale are going to have good awareness of themselves and the people around them and the environment and what's happening in the environment around them. They're going to have balance, meaning they balance the different areas of their life in a way that keeps them more centered and not overly stressed. They have good self-control, so they're less impulsive. Tend to be motivated, so have goals, and then those goals excite them, and they're motivated to do that. They have good focus. They're more at peace and content. They're patient people. They're content. So when we talk about happiness, some people think, well, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. And I think when people say that, they're thinking that they need to feel euphoric all the time. And that may not be, well, that's not very realistic unless you're on some sort of drug that gives you euphoria. We know that doesn't last either. So contentment is just the fact that people are content with their life and they feel good and they have moments of like euphoric feelings or moments, and then they kind of return to just a baseline of feeling content. They also incorporate gratitude into their day-to-day life. So rather than looking at all the stressors or the threats, they're actually intentionally looking at experiences and things that they can be grateful for. And I mean, big things, but also minor things. And they feel connected to people. They can relate to other people, even if there are people that they may have conflict with. Now, obviously, having all these traits, I mean, people are going to fluctuate with some of these, but these are the traits that would contribute to a person having a high level of emotional intelligence. Sorry, I'm just gonna want to keep track of this chat here just in case something comes in. Okay. So traits of a person or people that are lower on the scale of emotional intelligence are going to feel lonely a lot. They're going to be in a state of anxiety a lot, meaning their brain is scanning for threats and identifying a lot of threats. They may be more frustrated or quick to frustration or anger. May feel a sense of guilt a lot, resentment, may deal with some depression, get disappointed easily. There's maybe instability in their life or in their mental health. And then there may be a lot of insecurities that they hold, which would result in being defensive and reactionary when those insecurities are triggered. And again, we all may experience some of those traits as well. It's just, do we recognize when we do, and how do we work through them? All right. So this would be the perfect workplace, which probably isn't achievable, but we can move in that direction. So just kind of think of what, if you had a lot of people with high level of emotional intelligence, whether, well, at home or at work. Imagine where there's mutual respect for everyone on the team. So we respected other people. We weren't quick to judgment. There wasn't a lot of gossip. We shut that down. People gossip. We say, oh, I don't want to hear that. That's not helpful. It's not helpful to the group. So there isn't really a rumor mill. Very little passive aggression, bullying, harassment, or unkind remarks. There was never ever finger pointing, yet everyone took responsibility for their mistakes. Conflict was openly discussed and fairly negotiated. Everyone worked hard and did their best, and people enjoyed coming in to work every day. So people have comments. What do you think the workplace would be like if everybody was like this. Yeah, productive, less stressful, I would imagine. Are they hiring? Yeah. Yeah, so this, I mean, this is likely if everybody were like this every second of every day, maybe not more creative, yes. So our creativity can be zapped by stress. A lot of the, like, if we have a lot of gossip, a lot of rumors, a lot of passive aggressiveness, people not doing their jobs when other people are relying on them, that creates a lot of animosity, tension, and stress, which reduces the productivity, which ultimately affects that business in a significant way. So I think it's important to think about, okay, how can I myself apply some of these behaviors and mindsets when I go into work or when I'm at home? And think about too, like how may, if you're a leader or maybe an informal leader in your workplace, how can you try to influence this if there are areas for improvement, which again, there's always going to be. This would be a perfect scenario. All right. So what is emotional intelligence? Textbook definition: the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. There's one thing in here that I think, and we'll get into this too, that's not included, is how a person thinks. Because we don't just experience emotions, we have thoughts that are running through our mind all day, every day, and those influence our emotions. So it's important. That's a piece that's missing here. Now, some people are naturally very good at recognize their emotional state, what might be causing that emotional state, and find ways to move through that uncomfortable emotional state. And then also understand how other people might, what they might be thinking or feeling. And then when they hear how a person might be thinking or feeling, they can kind of empathize with it, meaning like, okay, I can kind of imagine what that might be like if I were in that situation. So some people need to work a bit harder at it. So this isn't something that, again, some people are just more self-aware. Oops, need to go back there, which is helpful, or they're naturally self-aware, or they just had really good parenting, coaching, or whatever. And some people develop a lot of blind spots over the years that maybe haven't been corrected. So there's a little bit of work that needs to be done there. And everybody has room for improvement. And obviously this can fluctuate depending like how well we are or how emotionally intelligent we are, can fluctuate depending on our life circumstances. Okay. Oops. So we have 4 different components to emotional intelligence. We have emotional awareness. So what emotions am I experiencing? What might be causing those emotions? And what am I thinking? Accurate self-perception. So how do I view, is how I view myself lined up with how other people view us? And a lot of times we don't really get that feedback about how we are viewed unless we might get that from people at home. At work, we might get some feedback from other people if they're comfortable, or that workplace in particular does a very good job of getting their team to reach its potential. Obviously, if we're going to do that, we have to give feedback, constructive feedback to people in order to be the best. Self-management. So recognizing thoughts and perceptions, like I mentioned before, and we'll get more into this, that a lot of us develop these perceptions of events or situations dating back to childhood. So how we view our social relationships, peer relationships, how we view the world. And those can become habitual over time. And so we have this kind of automatic response to certain situations that our brain associates with memory. And so then we have, our brain categorizes a lot of things so that we can have immediate thoughts and reactions to threats or pleasure or novelty. So we have to be aware of how do I think about things? And like, what are the nature of my thoughts when I'm distracted? Like when I'm doing something mundane where I don't have to be externally focused. And then how do I manage my reactions to that? So think of like we have habitual interactions with people. Think about like partner that you've lived with for a long time, or with your kids if you have kids, or certain friends that you've known for a really long time. A lot of our interactions tend to be the same. We have a certain kind of banter or way we interact. And same with when we fight or argue, things that kind of set us off, and we kind of just automatically react in a habitual type way. And a lot of times when we automatically react, it's typically going to be in a way that might escalate a situation. So social awareness would be having empathy and compassion. Now there's a difference between this. Empathy meaning somebody comes and tells me a story about, I don't know, maybe their spouse is diagnosed with cancer. Okay, well, I've never had cancer. I've never had any, maybe I haven't had any person that close to me that's had cancer. So I guess I can't relate on that level, but I can understand what it might be like if like I found that out myself, or like my wife came to me and said something like that. I can kind of envision what my reaction might be. So it's not necessarily feeling bad for people either, empathy. It's just putting yourself in their shoes by kind of imagining what it might be like if you were in that situation. And then compassion would be, again, that's also not feeling bad or pity. I guess when I say bad, it's more pity. People don't really like to be pitied. Compassion is just how you express the empathy. And then also being socially aware would understand what our biases are. And everybody, I don't care if people say they aren't biased, they are. Everybody has biases based on societal trends and how we were raised, and things that we were taught growing up, and what we saw with parents and family members and even our peers. So we develop biases, and it's important. Biases are going to be automatic snap judgments of people. You'll notice that I don't know, how many of you would you say, like when you meet somebody new, your mind kind of automatically is kind of coming to some sort of conclusion or judgment of what this person might be like? Are they good or bad? So we kind of have those dichotomies, I think, that we quickly try to make a judgment. How many of you notice yourself doing that? Nobody? Okay, so it's important to recognize though that we do that, and I think we're trying to determine if a situation is safe or not. Like, is this person a threat or are they not? Or we associate some cue or something they say or something they do with maybe someone that maybe we didn't like or we liked in the past. So that's kind of how we make a quick judgment. And then I don't know, I've noticed a lot of times, maybe I view somebody as like a certain thing they do. I just met them that I'm kind of turned off by, and I may form this judgment, but then after I get to know them a little more, it's like, oh, that wasn't correct. So it's important to know that our judgment, especially initially, automatically is not always very accurate. And then lastly, social skills require that we communicate effectively, and that's a vague term. I'm going to throw this out here too, so I hope to get some responses. But when you hear the word effective communication, or you hear the concept of effective communication, again, vague. So what does that even mean? What does it mean to be an effective communicator? And people can speak too if they want. You don't have to just write into the chat. Okay, so sending a message that is received with the intended meaning. Okay. So does that mean maybe being concise and clear? Active listening, sure, absolutely. Being able to organize your thoughts, right? Now I want to just talk about the active listening here. So active listening, and you make a very good point, because that is a part of communication. However, it's not like being verbal. I mean, we can show nonverbal cues indicating that we are actively listening. either that or you're just really good at acting. But typically you can sense if somebody's actively listening. So that also means that you're not listening to speak. You know, a lot of people will listen, but they're kind of just like waiting for that moment where they can jump in and say something or say what they want to say. So active listening is kind of, you have to be intentional in doing that. You have to like say to yourself, okay, I'm going to listen to this person, and then like any thoughts or judgments that I have coming into my mind, I'm going to kind of just let those go. And I'm going to really focus on what they're saying and try to understand what they're saying. And yes, like being able to organize your thoughts. So in conflict, what do we notice about conflict situations? And do you think that it's easy or hard to organize our thoughts and communicate what we want? Yes, so it's more difficult. So a conflict situation, our parasympathetic or our sympathetic nervous system is activated, unless you've gotten very, very, very skilled at this and being in conflict, because it is a skill. People don't just, it's very hard to, I mean, most people I don't think are just naturally good with conflict. Some might be more naturally better, but it's a learned skill. One of the reasons it's more difficult, because you're either in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so we know when that sympathetic nervous system is firing off, that frontal part of our brain shuts down a little bit, becomes harder to think rationally. So this is a skill that people have to develop. And then, yes, thinking on the fly. So then we can, a lot of times when we're thinking on the fly, we can branch off, and then it becomes harder for a person to understand like what we're trying to say or communicate. Social skills also includes assertiveness and healthy boundaries. And I'm sure everybody's seen this. Think of like in the workplace where you have a leader or a boss or even just a peer who is aggressive. Like, and I don't mean physically, I mean more take charge, speaks over people, more authoritarian per se, kind of dominates the room or the conversations. And maybe they have some level of power, meaning like people have to kind of work with them or for them. And you'll notice that some people who have are not, do not have, their strength is they're not strong in assertive communication, and they're not strong with setting boundaries. You'll find that those individuals will be treated very poorly by that authoritarian type. And that authoritarian type has no problem walking all over a person who lacks assertiveness and healthy boundaries. And then you might notice that that same leader or person that's that more authoritarian type, that their interactions made completely look completely different when they're interacting with somebody who is assertive, high level assertiveness, healthy boundaries. You might notice that they won't, that leader, that person with those authoritarian traits does not speak the same way to a person with higher level of assertiveness and boundaries. And the reason is that assertiveness can kind of shut down that energy, that assertive communication, having boundaries and being firm in those will shut down that more aggressive style. And assertiveness is also a learned skill. And again, it's a spectrum. Some people are naturally better at it than others. But people can learn to be more assertive. So one of the fundamental concepts of this, kind of at the core of it, is awareness of our emotions and how they drive us, awareness of our own strengths and weaknesses, awareness of our perceptions and judgments of self and others. And again, this is an evolving thing for people as humans, because life changes. We have different things that come up. We mature. And so this is a kind of it's just an evolving thing for everybody. And remember, perceptions are our thoughts. So here we get into talking about thoughts versus emotions. Has anybody heard the concept that our thoughts trigger an emotional reaction, which triggers a behavioral reaction? No. Okay. So, and I didn't mention this at the beginning. So my primary job is as an employee assistance counselor, which I assume most of you know that what the EAP is if you're attending this, but just what we primarily do is provide counseling services, short-term counseling services to people that work at the companies or the employer that you work for. It's also available to members within your household. So our primary job here is counseling people, but then we also do these workshops. So we have we have thoughts going through our mind all day, every day, during waking hours. And some of those we don't even really recognize are happening. So think about if you're brushing your teeth. You've done that tons of times. You don't have to think a lot about it. Like, how many of you are actually paying attention to the thoughts that are going through your head? Hold up, I gotta stop this share real quick. I don't know what just happened. I hope we are. So how many of you just kind of zoned out? Sometimes. Okay. So I just kind of, I don't know, challenge you to kind of pay attention, like if you're driving in your car to work or the place you've gone 1,000 times, to maybe just pay attention to the thoughts that go through your mind. Because I'm guessing that you'll notice that you're thinking about things that you have to do in the future, that you need to get done, that you are maybe worrying about things in the future, like what if this, what if that, or you're dwelling on things from the past. All right, so here we go. Sorry about that. Or we might be thinking, let's say, like, oh, I got this fun thing coming up this weekend that I'm looking forward to. But we're not like trying to have those thoughts, and there's not really any sort of logical order to them. If your mind's wandering, they'll kind of just fluctuate from one to the other. So you're not being intentional in your thinking. You're not being focused. You're kind of think of your mind as being on autopilot. But the three categories of information that your brain will pay attention to are going to be threat. That's the number one thing, which can mean a lot of things. Like I said, it could be like worrying about something you got to do in the future or worrying about a potential negative outcome of something. That's threat. Novelty, you'll pay attention to something that is new that maybe you haven't seen or done before. And then lastly, pleasure. So pleasure could be, doing something that you enjoy. I'm sure when you think of pleasure, your mind goes to like some of the common things, but I also, by pleasure, it could just mean, well, I expect this particular outcome with like this tasks that I'm doing today. And then when it's achieved, it's like, oh, I get a sense of pleasure or accomplishment would be a sense of pleasure. On the flip side of that, our expectation, like if I expect something to go a certain way, it doesn't go that way, then I'm disappointed, and that's a perception of threat. So we all have these automatic ways of thinking in response to different situations, and that will elicit an emotional consequence. So if you think, I don't know, maybe somebody just maybe as I'm continuing to go through this, write in something that nothing major, super serious, because you don't want to disclose anything super personal, but I don't know, think about something that, I don't know, has been bothering you that you're worried about. Um, Meeting deadlines for projects at work. Okay. So think of that along the lines of Well, what is the thought? Like, what if what? What if what? As it pertains to deadlines for projects at work. What if I can't finish in time? Okay, and then what happens if you can't finish in time? Like, what? Help with grants. If I don't finish, we may not receive funds. Okay. Child's divorce. Okay. Yeah. So it's helpful, I think, to think of, remember the what if. So a lot of anxious thoughts we have are going to be what if this, what if that. All right. And so these examples that you gave, think of like when you think about these things, what is the feeling or emotion that you experience when you are thinking about those things? So when you think about like child's divorce, like we don't just think, oh, there's a divorce, they're getting divorced. Our mind goes deeper into that. Like, what does this mean for my kid? Dread, negative self-talk. Okay, right. So there might be some sort of stimuli that makes you think about a child's divorce, or yeah, fear and anxiety. So you may think of something may trigger you to think about like, oh, I've got to get this project done, or my kid's going through a divorce. But that's not the end of it. Your thoughts going to continue to go down the path of like, well, this might mean this might mean that, and typically it's going to be a negative outcome. So then, yeah, that's going to elicit fear, which I think anxiety is and fear somewhat of the same. Okay. Now it's also important to understand. So the thoughts that we have about certain situations will influence an emotional response, and then we'll have a behavioral response. So let's say I'm thinking, well, what if I don't get done, or that grant is due in a week. What if I don't get it done, and then we don't get the money, and then that's going to get people fired or programs lost? Well, okay. So then you feel anxious or afraid. Are you in my head? Okay. Uh, so then you feel anxious or afraid. And then how does that dictate your behavior? So, well, I'm stressed now. So it might be harder for me to concentrate and focus on what I need to do, meaning that it's going to take me longer. I'm short with people. Yep. So, okay. So you're going to be quicker to frustration with other people, and they might be confused by that. So it's gonna impact, yeah, your performance, how you interact with people. Some people might even like procrastinate even longer. They're like, oh, it's too much. I'm gonna just have to wait until like it absolutely has to get done. Some people might withdraw too. So one of the most common behaviors associated with highly anxious people is avoidance. And there's a lot of subtle ways we can do that. One last thing here to mention is that, and I hear this all the time, people mix up the difference between an emotion and a thought. Okay. So a lot of times when I ask people, what do you think about that? They'll say, I feel like this. It's like, well, no, that's not, you're not describing a feeling, you're describing a thought. So if someone is thinking or says, I think that you are nice, that is a thought. That guy really irritates me. You're more so describing an emotion. I feel irritated. Now, why that person irritates you, like, might be related to some line of thinking. I feel angry. Well, okay, yeah, you're describing an emotion. And then ice cream is great. That's a thought. Okay. All right. So also part of being aware, socially aware from the emotional or self-aware from the emotional intelligence standpoint is one, understanding the different range of the different types of emotions and the ranges that there are. So think of like you have neutral in the middle, and then you've got the different emotions we experience. So you look at anger can be on a scale from slightly irritated to enraged. Okay. Um, let's say guilt, that might range from like slightly embarrassed to ashamed. Okay. So each of these different emotions they're on a scale. Some people only recognize when they're mad or happy. Okay. And so if you only recognize or like one or two different emotions, then you're lacking in awareness of emotions. And so even just by increasing your emotional vocabulary, you might find that helps just in like, okay, this is what I'm feeling now. Like, let's say I feel embarrassed. Well, what am I embarrassed about? Or maybe I just get angry, but I'm really embarrassed by something because somebody embarrassed me or said or did something that embarrassed me. And that's why I'm angry, but I only recognize the anger. So it's important to be able to recognize your emotions. So think about like, okay, I wake up in the morning. What do I feel like? So if I wake up in the morning and say I hit my snooze button twice, and now I only have 30 minutes to get ready. Well, I'm going to get up and my thoughts are going to be, I only have 30 minutes to get ready. I need to hurry up, which is going to stress me out, which would make me feel nervous, okay, or anxious. Car is making a funny noise. That might make me, that could make me angry because that means I might have to spend a lot of money on something. Or it can make me scared. So kind of you got to think about like the emotional reaction or what state of my, what are my emotions like right now? All right. So I don't know that I totally agree with you can't really control your feelings. I do think you can by trying to find different ways of thinking about things. But sometimes, yeah, it does seem hard to control our feelings. You can control the way you express your feelings, and that is for certain. And then you can manage the thoughts that lead to the emotional state that you're in. So this is a good example of the whole how can I alter the way I think about things? Most of the time when we're in a stress, when I said like I said, that sympathetic nervous system is firing off. The thoughts we have automatically in response to a perceived threat are typically not the most rational. Okay. So look at here, you got on the left, Joe gives you a dirty look. The automatic thought is, oh, I knew it. Joe doesn't like me. Okay. Then I feel angry. I might feel angry. I might feel sad. I might act defensively. Or maybe I'm more guarded around Joe now, try to avoid because I'm projecting this belief that, oh, Joe gave me a dirty look. He doesn't like me. So then I'm more tense. I may be more glaring. Maybe I avoid, or maybe I even get more passive aggressive with Joe. But I don't even know. Like this is all based on this speculative belief that Joe doesn't like me because I saw him make a dirty look. Okay. So the alternative, Joe gives you a dirty look. Oh, I wonder if Joe is having a bad day. Maybe that look wasn't directed at me. So if I think, well, maybe Joe's having a bad day. Now my emotional response to that is more going to be likely of like concern or compassion. It's not going to be like, oh, this person's like, it's not like I detected some threat. And so then the new behavior might be, okay, maybe I smile at Joe or ask Joe how he's doing. Or if I ask him, hey, Joe, like I noticed that you seem a little down today. Like, are you okay? So you can see here how the two different lines of thinking are going to elicit different emotional and behavioral responses. Like I mentioned before, like thoughts and feelings are very fast and automatic. So like, let's say somebody, I don't know, let's say somebody says something like, well, let's say my boss says, oh, you need to make sure that like you're getting all your, you're noting or like you're documenting every single hour or every single task that you do because we need to show that we're being productive. Okay. Well, and then maybe that's new. Maybe that's something I hadn't really heard before. Well, my immediate thought before I can even snap my finger might be, oh, somebody's looking at productivity and thinks like, ooh, maybe they're not so productive. What if my job's in jeopardy? And then I'm going to be scared or anxious or even defensive. Okay. So very fast and automatic thoughts that are based on sensory input, things we hear along with the other senses. Our brain associates that with memory and also our own internal dialogue to predict an outcome. Okay. And that's all done like that. So then we form judgments based on that. So it's important to like start recognizing like when you even have the slightest activation of the sympathetic nervous system, like everybody throughout their day, like they're hit with stressors and then they return to baseline. We just have different degrees of like our reactions to different stressors are going to be dependent on how the perceived severity of it. The best approach is to look at like even the little minor things that trigger a stress response and to be like, okay, I'm just going to take a few deep breaths here and think about like what was just said or done or that is making me have this stress response. And you're going to notice the stress response because your heart rate's going to increase, your breathing is going to become shallower. You're going to notice the heart rate. You're going to notice that. And if you're feeling irritated, like all of a sudden you have like this burst of frustration, like you may not express it, but you recognize it, or you're about to react. To take a step back and be like, okay, like what's going on here? Or am I just overreacting to this? Take a step back, calm myself down, and then you can analyze the situation more critically. See what time we got here. 12:42. Okay. This may go till 1. If you have to leave, obviously go for it. So self-perception. We talked about how it's important that the perception we have of ourselves is in line mostly with what other people that know us well think of us. Okay. If it's not accurate, if there's an imbalance there, then there's some work that needs to be done to bring that more in line. So obviously, how we perceive ourselves, that is going to influence we'll just say self-esteem or our confidence. So so here you can see poor self-perception. I'm going to take the focus off self, focus on flaws and faults, hard time speaking up for self, consider self less important than others. So a person like this, lower self-worth, is going back to the whole assertiveness thing. They're not going to show a lot of high level of assertiveness. And then this person is more likely to be more anxious and maybe even have some depressive tendencies. It might be quiet. Now, on the flip side of that is inflated self-worth, which is very much associated with the low self-worth. So here you kind of have with the low self-worth, you have a person that might become more withdrawn, quiet. On the flip side of that, the inflated self-worth is like, I'm compensating for this low self-worth. And so I'm going to compensate for that by being very selfish, minimizing and denying faults, not very respectful of other people, and then consider yourself more important than other people. And so I'm sure all of you can imagine, you can probably pick up on this with people. And then where we want to be is more in the middle. Okay. We want to be able to recognize our strengths without being cocky. So how can we not be cocky? Well, if I'm actually have a realistic recognition of a strength or strengths that, okay, well, maybe I should be grateful for that. Or maybe I worked hard to develop that particular skill or trait. So being thankful for having the motivation and that can kind of balance that out. So we want to be more in the middle here. So people with an accurate self-perception and positive or healthy self-esteem are going to be able to easily list strengths and weaknesses. So if I said to you, I want you to write down 10 strengths, 10 weaknesses you have, they'd be able to come up with both. Okay. Will accept criticism from others without getting upset. So that requires a mindset of, I am always learning. I can always be better. And if I'm getting feedback from someone, I'm going to listen to it and then think about it and process it without immediately reacting and getting defensive. Takes responsibility for mistakes. On the flip side of that, will not take responsibility for other people's mistakes, because people will do that. Accepts compliments from others. So not denying or minimizing a compliment, but saying, oh, thanks, I appreciate that. Can speak up for yourself in a tactful way, and then respects other people's opinions. So I'm not going to try to immediately like dominate and beat you because I don't agree with your opinion. So to increase self-confidence, if someone is low in confidence, you'd want to first start, because a lot of times people that are low in self-confidence, they'll minimize or not even pay attention to positives or times that they've maybe acted in a way or done something that they think would be the healthier way. They'll minimize or ignore, filter out. So one way to build confidence is to identify situations where you have succeeded or demonstrated those positive qualities, and then give yourself credit for it, because people with low self-worth will be like, well, that you should be able to do that anyway. If they're speaking to themselves, like, I should be able to do that anyway. Like, that's not that big of a deal. Like, anybody can do that. It's like, well, maybe not for you. It's not something you normally do. So you have to give yourself credit for that. Change negative thoughts about yourself to more positive and realistic ones. This will influence how you view yourself, how you feel about yourself. One way to kind of do that too is, like, if you're stuck in a negative cycle of thinking regarding a certain situation, is to like think about, like, what if my best friend was saying this to me, like that they think this way about themselves, and what would I tell them? Because I guarantee you, you're going to find that it is like you're going to tell them the complete opposite of what you say to yourself. Identify situations. So to increase humility, identify situations where you have made mistakes. Be honest with yourself. So you don't beat yourself up. You say, okay, like, I made a mistake. It's an honest mistake. I didn't mean to. How can I learn from this so that the next time I don't make the same mistake? Give yourself credit for success, but then also acknowledge when other people were involved in that. Demonstrate concern for others. So listen more than you speak. That can be tough if you're a talker. But it is a good thing to try out because it's not natural, and you might find that it's like, kind of relaxing actually. The empathy. So try to put yourself in other people's shoes. When you notice yourself judging, maybe take a step back and be like, okay, well, is this judgment accurate, or is it just a quick automatic? That might kind of the automatic part of my brain. So self-management. So once we have accurate self-awareness, then we are more in a better situation to control emotional reactions and change inaccurate perceptions. So if someone tells you off for no reason, like, do I get angry and want to fight the guy or punch the guy, or do I am I able just to be like, okay, this is a little bit ridiculous and I'm just gonna walk away, or, I'm not gonna react. I'm not gonna let someone escalate me. When there are dirty dishes left in the break room sink, like, we don't just start slamming dishes down in front of people. When you're working your butt off and your coworker is on her phone again, like, okay, well, I'm gonna do what I need to do. I'm not going to cover for someone or hide their laziness, but I'm not gonna let that influence my mood or consume my energy. That's this is outside of my control, what other people do. When you come home to a disaster zone after work and your spouse is watching TV, maybe you approach it in like a more tactful way. So this isn't like, oh, you just don't address these situations. Just how do I manage my reaction to it in a more productive way to influence a better outcome? I've talked a lot about the sympathetic nervous system today. Again, this gets fired off every day. If someone said I never have any stress ever, or like I go through days where there's zero stress, I don't know. I don't know that I would believe them. So just the physiological, what's going on when that's fired off is you're getting adrenaline pumping out, cortisol is released, muscles tense, heart beats quicker. Breathing becomes quicker and shallow, which means you're getting less oxygen to your brain, which is why I like deep breathing when under stress can alleviate or shut down the sympathetic nervous response. Logical thought stops, reactions come fast, and survival is the main focus. So again, survival, when we say that, it's like that's kind of the primal part of the brain, detects threat. You have this physiological response internally, logical part of the brain shuts down, and then I need to win or fight becomes kind of the main focus. So I guess I would just throw this out there. I don't know. Think about the next time, maybe, I don't know. Sometimes I get stressed, like I get annoyed if I'm say I'm at the grocery store and there's a long line, people are taking forever. I might notice myself getting like frustration levels increasing. And so if I just take a moment and I breathe in deeply through my nose and out through my mouth, you can count, that'll calm that down. And this is something that's very easy to do. Also with the breathing, you can drop the shoulders, stick out the chest, because again, when we're stressed, like we tense up, shoulders move in. If someone's under a lot of stress, you might find that like you're constantly like, shoulders are low. Some people might even clench their jaw, like that's a sign that you're stressed. So we got the breathing, the chest out, shoulders back. You can also do something like visualize, find a photo or visualize, imagine a scene or an environment that would be really relaxing to be in, and what might it look like, sound like, smell like, feel like, is a grounding technique, which allows you to direct your attention to using those senses. So what that does is it's just redirecting your attention to something that is more neutral and relaxing than allowing your attention to dwell on the stressor. The more details you imagine, the more relaxed you'll become. So like if you have a window, you can like just look out and even just pick a tree or something and just start naming, like in your mind, naming off all the things like, oh, I see, see the leaves are green and I see like the contours in the leaves and I see the branches and the wind's blowing it. And you can just keep going and going and going. I don't think I'm going to go through this. I think it's pretty well known these days that what we consume, if we consume healthy items, that's going to influence our mood. Moving, exercise, that is pretty much a fail-proof stress reliever. And then obviously getting good sleep, not much, try to, shutting off screens, not because that's all stimulating. Okay. Social competence. So this is somewhat of a kind of review, but that's to be competent socially, it's going to require us to understand other people's emotions and thoughts, recognizing and accepting differences, not judging. Like, okay, well, I don't have control over how this person might be different. Remember, our brain likes to categorize bad, good. Okay. So we got to get outside of that black and white type thinking. Awareness of biases. So how our biases influence our judgments and perceptions of others. And then we have to challenge those. So that's going to influence how we interact with people. So empathy is not agreeing, it's just understanding. And we can always ask questions to understand someone without like, because sometimes our tone and how we ask questions is gonna like, am I genuinely curious of understanding this person or like the person's thoughts around their opinions or their perspectives, or am I asking questions that are challenging them? So seeking to understand. I'm sure everybody's heard this this concept, and we've all hurt people because we were upset, angry, scared, or hurt. This question, what if the people who are unkind to you are really the ones who are suffering? Which I would say that that is mostly the case. Oops. I talked a little bit before about expectations and how expectations can cause stress. So here are strategies for identifying expectations. So if our expectations aren't met, we're disappointed or stressed. So asking yourself then, like, were my expectations too high? Were they unrealistic? Have I communicated those expectations to other people? Or what are the expectations of myself? Some people who are have more perfectionist type tendencies have unrealistic expectations of themselves, setting them up for failure. And then do you expect to never have challenges or difficulties? So accepting the fact that we are going to have challenges and difficulties in itself can sometimes reduce stress. And am I just causing myself more stress and pressure through these automatic kind of expectations I have of myself or other people? I think kindness is always a strategy that can help reduce stress and influence your interpersonal interactions in a positive way. Ways to do that, just forgiving someone in your mind for something they did. Give someone the benefit of the doubt, give a compliment, saying thank you, saying good morning. I also think using people's names, like let's say people that maybe you don't know or not as close with, but in the workplace, like people that maybe we don't interact as much, is like calling somebody by their name, saying like, let's say each morning I walk past a person, I know their name, but I don't say it or because I don't really remember it. And I just maybe say hi. I think, yeah, that can be good. I mean, it's good to do that, but what if I say, oh, hi, John, how are you doing? Like, there's a little bit more of a positive, I think, response to that. Publicly praise a coworker for going above and beyond, or even just praise them confidentially. When you hear gossip, change the conversation toward praise and gratitude about the person or situation. Make eye contact with people. Converse with someone you don't particularly like and look for something good about them during the conversation. Try to get to know them, maybe. All right, so we're going to have to stop here because there's a lot more slides here. Does anybody have any comments? Thanks for. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't really expecting a ton. Most people aren't. Nobody knows each other, so totally fine. Yeah, hopefully it was helpful. Anybody has, if anybody has any comments or anything like that? All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. I am going to end the presentation here. And everybody enjoy the rest of your day. And if you like the heat, I hope you get outside.